Hey guys, this is Harshita, and before we start the session, do let me know in the chat section, am I all audible to you all? Just say a small yes, and I'll be good to go. Okay, great. So, hi guys, this is Harshita, your host for the day, and I hope you guys are doing great and staying safe. And we are welcome to this workshop, yet another workshop with Sophia, where she is going to demonstrate shadows. Ways to add dimensions to your lettering. Today's event is brought to you by Print Shop by Designhill, which is a creative print on demand marketplace where you can discover and buy 50 plus unique products, gifts, artworks created by the artists all around the world. So, moving ahead, we have with us Sofia Riccardi again. And seeing the overwhelming response from our previous workshop with Sophia, we have decided to come back here today to do the part two of the session. And I would like to thank Sophia, who has taken out her time, be here, and help us with amazing tips and tricks. So let me introduce Sophia for today. Sofia is a lettering artist from Argentina, and in June 2019, she did her first lettering workshop. And from that moment, she has done different types of courses with many different artists. She has participated in collaborative book of Edding in 2019. She has written an article about types of lettering in blogs of Ogni Livrars in 2020. And now she is working on mural project at hospital's pediatric ward, and she is preparing the design for a wine taster's notebook. Hand lettering is her passion, and she loves seeing her letters everywhere. Wow. So, your letters, as I already stated, your letters are everywhere. Sophia, how are you?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me again. It's a
Great,
pleasure for me to be here.
great, guys. So, before we start the session, here's a quick material requirements to add. So, just to, before we start the session, just our attendees let us know what are the materials we'll be requiring for this event.
Yes, well, we need a sheet of paper, any paper you have at home, and two brush pens. If you have two different colors, and if you have a gray one, it will be great because gray is the best one to draw shadows. Yes, a brush pen is the one that has this type of point. Yes, so you need two of them, and then you need a rounded point marker. It can be a pen, a pencil, anything you have with rounded point at home.
Okay, great guys. So just grab all the things. And before we start the session, here's a big announcement. We are giving away the certificates to all the attendees who will stick till the end of the session. So you just can't miss on this chance. Stay tuned, guys. And also, you can take the screenshot of this event, put on your Instagram stories, tag DesignhillDH, Typography Designers Club, and SR Lettering. And one lucky winner will have a chance to win print shop gift card worth $50. All the details and all the account details will be there in the chat section in a while. So, having said that, let's quickly look at what Print Shop by Design Hill is all about. All right, guys, so that was all about Print Shop, and now we are all set to start the session. So, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Sophia, just put them under the questions tab, and we have rolled out a few polls in the poll section. So, don't forget to answer them too. So, Sophia, let's begin the session, and all over to you.
Okay, I will change the camera here. Okay, I'm just going to answer one of the questions that I read there in the chat. That you can use a pencil instead of a gray brush pen. So if you have a pencil at home, you can use that tool too. Okay, So let's start. We're going to talk about shadows. Yes, shadow is the dark area of the shape produced by a body coming between a rays of light and a surface. Yes, so the first thing we have to think is where is the source of light located. So if we have, you can see there, yes, if we have four sides of the sheet of paper, the light usually comes from above. So we're not going to learn the one that comes from below. If the light comes from above, we have that it can come from the left or it can come from the right. Yes? So if we have our letter, for example, the A, we have two options, that the light comes from above and from the left, and we have the option that it comes from above and from the right. So as the shadow is the area of the shape produced between the rays of the light and the surface, we will have the shadow in the opposite side from where the light comes from. So if we
Sophia,
have,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can your
yes,
camera be upside down?
um, yes, no, para la vuelta, al revés, así. Ujú. Pero esta, no, al revés. Like this,
Yes, but it's a mirror image. Your A is looking to us as an invert. Yes, this is
like
perfect.
this.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so we have that the light comes always from above and it can come from the left or from the right. So our shadow will be in the opposite side from where the light comes from. Yes, so the first thing we have to think is where the source of light is located. Then we will do the shadow at the opposite side. For example, I will draw here a letter A with the brush pen. We remember that when we do brush lettering, when we draw letters in brush lettering, we have the downstrokes are the thick strokes and the upstrokes are the thin strokes. If I imagine my source of light here, my shadow will be in the opposite. So it will be below the stroke and the light is in the left, so it will be on the right. So it will be here, 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 and here. Below the stroke and on the right. On the opposite, if I think with the same letter that my source of light comes from the right, my shadow will be located below the stroke and on the left. So here, here, and here. Is it clear?
Yes,
If you
Sophia, it's clear, but I think there is too much of light. So we are getting a few of the comments like it's kind of blurry. So can we dim some of the light? There is too much of sunlight,
yes,
I guess, or the lighting.
wait a minute, and like this. Is that better?
Actually, no, it's kind of a blurry.
Mm.
Your screen is not focused. Yes,
There?
perfect, perfect, perfect.
Okay, right. Okay, so I will repeat so everybody can understand this. You have to think where the source of light comes from. So if the light comes from above and from the left, our shadow will be on the right and below the stroke. And if the shadow comes from above and from the right, our shadow will be on the left and below the stroke also. Then we have different types of shadows, so we are going to learn them. I will write a word. I will write, for example, shadow, and we will see how we can draw the shadows in this word. So let's imagine that our source of light comes from above and from the left. I will draw the shadow with a gray, and it will be on the right and down and below the stroke. Always on the opposite side of the source of light. And on the opposite side, if we have the same word, but we think that our source of light comes from above and from the right, we will have our shadow on the opposite side. So on the left and above the stroke. The first time you draw shadows, you will have to think of every stroke of every letter. You have to think is on the right or on the left, above or below. But then you get used to this, and it's so much easier. Yes. So you have two types of shadows. I always recommend that you have to choose one of them. For example, my favorite one is the one that the source of light comes from above and from the left. And if you just choose one of them, you can practice and practice and practice, and it will be much easier to draw shadows then in all your compositions. So if this is clear, I can go on with the other topic, that is the different types of shadow that we have. I'm going to teach you.
Sophia,
Yeah.
I'm sorry
Yes.
again to interrupt. Can you just zoom in your camera to your sheet, baby? Because people are saying that it's kind of a blurry.
Yes.
Yes, yes, perfect.
Like this.
Yes,
Okay. Um, right. Like this. Okay. Well, so here is the first thing that we have to think about shadows, that there is where the source of light is located. The other thing that we are going to learn is different types of shadows. I will teach you 6 types of shadows. The name of these shadows is the one that I have named them, but perhaps in other pages or in other workshops you will find them with different names. The first one that we are going to learn is the one that I call the simple shadow. I will always use the shadow in the source of light coming from the left and from above. Yes, I will draw it here so you can remember, but you can choose any of the both types of shadows that I've taught you. So here you have the simple shadow is the one that the shadow is stick to the stroke. You can draw the shadow with a gray marker or with a brush pen of any color you have at home. And you also can draw this shadow with a gray pencil. Yes, a simple pencil. And all the shadow will be stick to the stroke, to the down strokes and to the up strokes, but always below the stroke and on the right, because our source of light comes from the left. Here is the result of the simple shadow. If, for example, I have another color of brush pen, especially with these colors like green, yellow, that are not so dark, you can draw the simple shadow with a rounded marker. Yes, so you do the same. You draw the shadow, stick to the down and to the stroke on the right and below them. Like this. So these are the 2 ways to draw the simple shadow, with a brush pen and with a rounded marker. The other type of shadow that I will teach you is the floating shadow. To draw this shadow, you have to think that our shadow will be floating, so it will be a little bit separate from the original stroke. You have to leave a space between the shadow and the original stroke. You always have to think where the source of light comes from and draw the shadow on the opposite side. Like this. So this is the floating shadow. And as we had in the simple shadow, we also can draw our floating shadow with a rounded marker or a pencil or a pen or any tool we have at home. The same, we have to draw the shadow a little bit separated from the original stroke. Like this. So here we have two types of shadows, the simple shadow and the floating shadow, and both types you can draw the shadow with a brush pen or with a rounded point marker. If we make a combination of these two shadows, we have another type of shadow that is called double. In this shadow, you first draw a floating shadow with a rounded marker. Remember that I'm always thinking of my source of light above and on the left. And then when you have your floating shadow, you will draw a simple shadow in that floating stroke. This simple shadow, you will draw it with your brush pen. So with the combination of the simple shadow and the floating shadow, you will get a double shadow. On the, on the other side, if you do, there is another one that is called delineated. That first you will draw a simple shadow. So with a brush pen, your shadow will be stick to the original stroke. always on the right and below the stroke, because my source of light is above and on the left. After you have drawn the simple shadow, you will delineate the shadow with a rounded marker. So it's like you're doing two simple shadows. And this is the other type of shadow that is called delineated. We have two more shadows. This one is called lined. In this one, you will use only a rounded point marker, and you have to think where the source of light comes from, and on the opposite side of the stroke, you will draw a lot of parallel lines that will go in the direction of the shadow. Always on the opposite side of the source of light. You have to draw all these lines parallels and from of the same length. Like this. This is called lined shadow. And the last one that we are going to learn is the three-dimensional shadow. To draw this shadow, we will have to think where the source of light comes from. It comes from the left and above, and we have to project that shadow on the opposite side of the letter, or in this case, of the number. We will draw all the lines to the opposite side, and then we are going to paint between those lines. There are two options. One is that you paint to the end of the sheet of paper, or the other one is that you close like this and you paint just until that point. Yes? So we've learned 6 types of shadows. The first one is the simple one, the stroke that you draw. The shadow you draw is stick to the stroke, the original stroke of your word. You can draw that shadow with a brush pen or with a rounded point marker. Then there is a floating shadow, the one that you have a space between your original stroke and the shadow that you're drawing. You can also draw this shadow with a brush pen or with a rounded point marker. Then you have the combination between those both shadows, that is the double shadow, in the one that you first draw a floating shadow with a rounded point marker, and then you draw a simple shadow of that rounded point marker stroke. Then you have the delineated. That is the one that you first draw a simple shadow and then you delineate the stroke with a rounded point marker. Then you have the lined, that the shadow is only with parallel lines on the opposite side of the source of light. And then you have the three-dimensional shadow, in which you have to think like projecting the shadow, yes, and you have to paint all the surface that it covers on the opposite side of the source of light. I don't know if you have any question about these 6 types of shadows that we've learned.
Yes, Sophia, we do have a lot of questions
A
and
lot.
lot of engaging in the attendees. These are people are loving your session, and I personally loved the types of shadows we all have. I personally didn't know we have so much of shadows in this. So, first question is from John. He is asking any tips for people who have shaky hands.
It's just practice. You have to practice a lot, and after so much practicing, you will see that you will improve your strokes.
Great. So second question is from Ashleen. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correct. His question is, how many types of shadows are there for beginners especially?
The first shadow that you have to learn is a simple shadow. If you learn this simple shadow, then you will be able to draw all the other types of shadows. Yes, but the first thing that you have to think is where is located your source of light, and then think about the opposite side of that source of light to draw your shadow. If you learn that tip from the beginning of the drawing, then it will be easier to draw any type of shadow that you like. But the first one that you have to learn is a simple one.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And more questions we'll be taking just after a small break. So, guys, this is an amazing workshop going on. I hope you guys are enjoying the session. Do let me know which is your favorite type of shadow till now in the chat section. And I would like to give a quick shout out to Print Shop by Designhill for organizing this event. And I hope you guys are taking the screenshot of this event and posting as your Instagram stories. All right, guys, so let's take a quick break and keep this interesting workshop going on. Stay tuned. We'll be back to hear more from Sophia.
I've always been creative and always been an artist. As a young girl, I used to paint rocks and I used to sell them for a quarter on the street. And I just fell in love with it. It just grew into a passion of mine. I started looking on the web and I came across Designhill, and they had a design contest to design a logo, and I entered it and I won. And I was like, oh, this is really great. I can pick and choose what type of logos or design projects I want to work on, and it allows me to be creative, keep my hands, with my tools and working, so it's kind of nice. It's really easy to use. You can scroll through the projects and there's sections that you could go by. It's really easy. There's a few clients who have come back to use the one-on-one projects. There's one client in particular, she owns a vintage shop, and I designed her logo, and she came back. She needed a design for a flyer, and she really liked the illustrations that I did for her, so she came back a couple of times with projects. I would recommend it, especially if you're a designer that's starting out and you want to learn from other designers, seasoned designers. It's a place to keep in the game and keep using your tools. It makes me feel great, and it kind of confirms that I should be doing this. And I love to see logos that I've designed out, and proud of that. And I think that the clients are so happy that their logo represents what they do and, makes them look good. It's a collaboration. It's good for me, and it's definitely good for them.
I'm so sorry, guys. I think there was some technical issue. I'm back again. And so I can see a lot of questions in the questions tab. And I found this one interesting. So I'm asking you this, Sophia. So in painting, we show the shadows from dark to light. Is that also done in the lettering or not necessarily?
Um, it's really uh,
It's there on your screen. You can just check it.
number three. Anytime, no. Where is it? Ah, here.
Yes.
So in painting, we show the shadows from the light, dark to light. Is that also done in letters? You can show them from the dark to the light, or you can just draw them the way I've taught you. Yes, once you learn these types of shadows, you can do many variations of them. Like in any art, any artistic tool, you can let your imagination fly and do whatever you want. So uh, you just have to think about where the shadow has to be located.
Okay.
After that, you can do whatever you want.
Perfect. So next question is from Solin, and he's asking, could you please do an example with the shadow coming from the right?
From the right, yes. I always choose the one that comes from the left, but just because it's the one that I like more. But if you think about where the source of light comes from, then you can draw any shadow you like. Yes, for example, the simple shadow. If you think that the source of light comes from the right, you have to draw the shadow on the left and below the stroke. So here, like this. You can see that it will be on the opposite side from the other shadow. Yes, one is on one side of the strokes and the other one is on the other side. Like don't know if you can see them, like this. The other one, you have to think the same that with the one that you will do with the brush pen, but you will do that and you will draw that shadow with a rounded point marker, or perhaps a pen or any marker you have at home. Yes, and if, for example, thinking it with the source of light at the right and above, you will draw the shadow on the left and below the stroke. It's the same that with the brush pen, but the only difference is that you draw the shadow with a rounded point marker. And this session, doing a composition, I've chosen a phrase that I like a lot, that is, there is no shadow without light. So we are going to do that composition with different types of shadows. So we can practice all of them in just one piece. So I will first draw there is. I invite you all to do this composition with me. And you can share this your works on Instagram.
Yes, guys, the account name of Sophia is there in the chat section, and Nidhi will again just share it with you. You can just tag her and let her know what all you have learned from this workshop.
There is no shadow without light. So we are going to practice different types of shadows in this composition. In the first two words, we are going to do the simple shadow with a gray marker. I'm always going to think my source of light on the left and above, so my shadow will be stick to the original stroke above and from the right. Then, in these two words, I'm going to use two different types of shadows. In no, I'm going to use the simple shadow, but the floating shadow, but with the rounded marker. So I'll draw the shadow with a little space between my original stroke and my shadow. And in the word shadow, I will do a double shadow. So first is a floating with my rounded point marker. And then I will add a simple shadow to this floating shadow that I draw before. Then in this word, in without, I will do a delineated shadow. So first I have to draw a simple shadow, and then I'll use a rounded point marker to delineate my shadow. Remember that here, for example, I'm using a gray brush pen, but you can also make shadows with any color you like. Also, you can choose different colors and combine them in one word. Yes,
So,
so
Sophia, talking about the matches and the contrast you are saying, so is there any particular way to choose a color for a shadow that you are using, as if you are using a red color for writing the letters, and then what color should we choose for the shadows?
you have two options. One is choosing a gray shadow. You have different types of gray. For example, here I show you, you have different types of gray, so you can choose any of them to draw your shadow. And the other option is to choose a color that matches with the one that you have in the original word. For example, if you use a light green, you can use a dark or a darker green to do the shadow, or opposite colors. For example, if you do the word in yellow, you can use, for example, orange to do the shadow, or red or gray or green, or any color you like. Yes,
Oh,
it's the
okay.
same. It's just a question of trying and uh, looking for different styles.
Okay, so I hope your question got answered. One of the attendees was asking this, so let's continue.
Here I'm delineating. It's the same with the rounded point marker. Here I'm using a black one, but you can also choose any color you want. Once you learn the technique and you remember that your shadow has to be on the opposite side of your source of light, then you can do whatever you want with the color that you need, that you like, and it will be okay. Just following these tips that I'm giving to you of where the shadow has to be located. So here we have the delineated shadow, and the last one, the word light, I'm going to do the lined shadow. So I'm going to draw a lot of parallel lines on the opposite side of my source of light. When you're starting to practice this lined shadow, another option is that you first do a simple shadow with a very light gray, for example, like this, and then you draw the lines over the stroke of that shadow, of that gray shadow, so you can see where the lines have to be drawn.
Okay, Sophia, so when you accidentally make a mistake, so what is the best way to cover that? Or we need to rework on the best and create the another artwork?
That's a great question. um, it depends on the mistake. Yes, there are some mistakes. For example, if you are doing a simple shadow and you make a mistake, you can uh, continue the shadow all around the stroke, and it's not a shadow, it's just a way of embellish your letters. But there are some mistakes that they can be covered, so you have to make your composition again.
Great. So thank you for asking this question, John. It was a really nice question. So let's
It's
continue.
something that happens to all of us, especially the first compositions, that you have to think very well where you're going to draw your shadow, and you have to imagine where the source of light is. And at the first times it's quite difficult, and but then you get used to it, and uh, it flows.
Great, great. So, Sophia, can we also use watercolor in creating shadows?
Yes, of course. You can use any tool you have at home. I told you before starting this workshop that you could also use a pencil. It's the same with watercolors. You can use any tool you have at home. You just have to think where you have to draw that shadow. Yes, with watercolors, you have to do the same thing. You can also use a gray watercolor, so it is similar to a real shadow.
Great, great. So, guys, we are left with just few more minutes. So, if you have any questions, do ask us. And taking the next question.
How would you make the letters and stand out? When you have a dark background, you have to use a color that contrasts that background.
Yes, that was the same question I was about to ask you.
Yes,
Great.
I searched for the question there. You have to use another color that contrasts that background. For example, you can use gold or silver pens or brush pens that are very that are appropriate for dark brown backgrounds, and if not, um, you can't see the words. And also the shadows on the opposite side, here you use dark colors, for example, black or gray. In a dark background, you can use white to do the shadow, for example. There are some pens that are white pens, and those are perfect to do shadows in dark backgrounds.
Okay, guys. So now my last question of the day, Sophia, it's what are the common mistakes you have done, and what tips or suggestions you have for our attendees and the
Well, other mistakes that I've done, the the main the principal mistake that we usually do when we are trying to draw shadows is to um, not to think where the source of light is. If you just think where the source of light is not possible to make mistakes. You just have to think about the source of light and think that your shadow has to be drawn on the opposite side of that source of light. The main mistake usually is that you draw your shadow in the same side of your source of light, and that's not a shadow. So you always have to think from the opposite side.
Great. So, all right, guys, this brings us to the end of this wonderful session with Sofia Ricari. This was indeed a value packed session, although there has been a lot that we could have learned, but unfortunately, we are limited by time here. I hope you guys enjoyed the session. I personally did. And thank you so much for coping up with our technical issues. So, once again, I would like to thank you, Sophia, for taking out your time and be the part of this event.
Thank you for inviting me again. It's a pleasure for me to do these workshops with you, and I'm available for any other workshop that you want to organize.
Great. So, we are definitely going to do a part three of it. So this is not it where it ends, guys. We have a lot more events lined up in the coming days. You can just check it on our events page. The link will be in the chat section. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. The same again, the link will be in the chat section. You can find all our events there, the upcoming one, this one, and everything. And also, we have recently launched some cool design challenges which are worth $5,000 per month. Any designer, non designer can be a part of it. Some awesome designs using the DIY tools you can create. The name of the tool is Designhill Studio. So do visit our challenges page. And on that note, I would like to say goodbye to everyone who has joined us here today. Take care, guys. Stay safe.